Lesson 5, area of circles. I've got a new formula for you today. The new formula is area equals pi r squared. Now this is a formula that maybe looks a little bit scary, it looks a little bit challenging, it's not something that you're used to seeing, but I'm going to break down the steps for you and hopefully show you that it's not as tricky as it looks when you first glance at it. All right, and we already know part of this formula. So in order to find the area, we know from last lesson what pi is. We're using 3.14 to represent that really, really long special number that keeps going and going and going. We're going to represent it with 3.14. That's simple enough. And you'll remember from previous lessons that in math, when two things are right next to each other, especially when we're doing equations like algebra and formulas, it means multiply. So really what this formula is telling us to do is to multiply pi times the radius squared. Now a bit of a review for what it means to square something. We've done this before when we looked at exponents. So here I have 8 squared. And what the exponent, so the little 2 up at the top, tells us is how many times to multiply the base number by itself. So 8 squared is the same thing as 8 times 8. We take the base number and we multiply it by itself the number of times that the exponent tells us to. Okay, so 8 squared is the same as 64. And remember, I gave you lots and lots of warnings. 8 squared does not mean 8 times 2. Okay, that would give us an answer of 16, which is very different than 64, and it's going to throw off your answer. So remembering that the exponent means you're multiplying the base number by itself that number of times. So really, if we jump back to the formula, what this is saying is we're taking pi and we're multiplying it times the radius times the radius. Okay, that's another way to think of it, which is probably a little bit easier way to look at it, or an easier way for your brain to understand it. 3.14 times the radius again, it means the exact same thing. All right, so let's try it with a real circle. So here we have a circle. Remember, the radius is the halfway distance across a circle. So we've got area equals 3.14 for our pi times the radius, which for this circle is 5 squared. So 3.14 times 5 squared. And 5 squared is really just the same thing as saying 5 times 5. So we come to 3.14 times 25. And then if you punch that in on your calculator, you may use those again today, you should end up with 78.5 centimeters. And now since we're doing area again, so we're finding the inside space of a circle, we need to put our squared at the end of our units. All right, so very similar, just following the steps, plugging into the formula what you know. Just keeping in mind that the radius squared is the radius times the radius, and then you just calculate from there. So hopefully not as challenging as it looks at the beginning, following those steps. One word of warning, you may see circles like this and you'll be asked to find the area. So you'll use your formula, area equals pi r squared, and it may be tempting as you're going along, you're maybe speeding up a little bit, going a little bit faster. And you do your 3.14, and then you just pop a 14 in, and then do your squared, and then keep going from there. Uh-oh, we've got a problem. If you're not thinking, you may accidentally put the diameter in, especially because we were working with a diameter last time. 14 is not the radius of this circle, it is the diameter. So you need to make sure that instead of that 14, you do a 3.14 times 7 squared. Okay, so make sure that you're using the radius instead of the diameter, because otherwise you will end up with the incorrect answer. So as long as you keep those things in mind and you follow your steps, you should be good to go for today's lesson.